The Toronto Raptors are in about as bad of a position as they've been as a franchise in a really, really long time. It's a team with an uncertain future, with a new coach, with a roster that doesn't make a ton of sense, and a GM that potentially has kind of lost his magic in terms of team building and putting together a group that actually has a really bright future. And what they do over these next 2 months is going to have a massive impact on what the future of Raptors basketball looks like. Now, as we start this conversation, there's team building stuff to talk about. There's roster construction, free agency trades, all kinds of stuff. But I think it's actually important to begin the conversation talking about the GM of the team. Masai Ujiri is someone that for the last handful of years has been regarded as one of the better GMs in the league. They win the 2019 title directly as a result of the Kawhi Leonard trade, which was a risky but shrewd move that allowed them to win the title. They wouldn't have won the title that year without that, and he deserves credit for that. Also deserves credit for how well they've drafted and founded some of these undrafted gems and developed guys. Pascal Siakam, late first round pick. OG Anunoby was someone that a lot of people thought was a risk as a first round pick. Van Fleet wasn't drafted. They've done an awesome job of finding guys that fit and work within their team, and he, as the GM, as well as the entirety of the front office, deserves a ton of credit for that. However, where they've gone since they won the title in 2019 is very, very interesting because they were still good the year after Kawhi left, and every team in the country, every fan in the country would take trading for Kawhi, winning the 2019 title, and him leaving in 2019 over not making the Kawhi trade and not winning the title in 19. So I'm not counting it against him that Kawhi left. It was a risk that he took, and it ended up, winning them the 2019 title. The year after that, they were still pretty good. Ever since then, from the year that they were playing in Tampa because the league was shut down and then came back and they couldn't be, traveling back and forth across the border, ever since that moment, there's been zero indication that the Toronto Raptors have a championship future with the roster that they have constructed. At no point beyond that 1 year after Kawhi left where they were still really good. After that point, zero indication that this is a group that needs to continue to be built around rather than shake things up and change things up. And to me, this feels like a front office that is still kind of holding on to this idea that they're a player away or they're 2 players away from turning this into a group that is truly, truly competitive. And that mindset starts, in my opinion, with the GM. And the reason that I say all that is because they have been constantly in rumors about possibly trading a handful of guys over the last couple of seasons, yet they haven't traded any of them. They've actually added guys like Jakob Poeltl, trading away a future first for someone like Jakob Poeltl, who's good, but they've actually added guys. And to me, this feels like a team that lacks a little bit of direction, and that starts with the front office. Now, when we kind of talk about a potential disaster scenario for a franchise, you have to think about how are they managing the assets they have on their team, right? And this past offseason, losing Fred VanVleet for nothing isn't the absolute worst thing in the world because he got a ton of money for Houston, and Toronto just kind of got priced out of bringing back VanVleet. That makes total sense, especially considering what they might potentially do to their roster here coming up. But they had opportunities to trade him in the few years prior for a ton of different guys, a ton of different assets, and they didn't do it. And then they lost him in free agency for nothing, which is something that never happens anymore. Teams always get value out of the guy that they think might leave, and that was a huge misstep for them. And now this year, they're not very good. And OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam are both free agents in 2024. This is their final year under contract. OG has a player option, but all reports are that he's going to opt out because he's going to get a ton of money. However, we still haven't really gotten any indication that Toronto's actually going to try and trade either of these guys. We also haven't really gotten any indication that either of them are going to sign an extension or that they're excited and happy to stay in Toronto. Everything is just very, very strange. What we have gotten an indication of is that if you go and ask about OG Anunoby, if you ask about Pascal Siakam, Toronto's asking for a lot. And that's been kind of a theme over the last couple of seasons, is that if you talk to Toronto about trades, you're going to kind of get the Daryl Morey treatment. You're going to get the, oh, you want OG Anunoby? Okay, cool. 4 first-round picks. Or, hey, you want Pascal Siakam? Yeah, we want Keegan Murray and 4 firsts. You're going to kind of get a guy that really, really overvalues his own players, especially when you consider the context of them being 2024 free agents. And that, to me, is a bigger concern than anything else if I was a fan of the Raptors. I'd obviously be concerned about VanVleet leaving for nothing, the possibility of Siakam and OG leaving for nothing in free agency, but more so the root of the problem and the concern that I would have is about if the GM has kind of lost his touch a little bit or if he's kind of stuck in the past and what that 2019 title meant. I still think that Masai is very, very good, but he has to, in my opinion, or the front office office has to adjust their mindset and realize that this team is just not very good. And if you're trading Siakam or OG or whoever, you have to do it with the understanding that you might not get maximum value for someone in either case, that the team that's trading for them doesn't know if they're going to sign long-term with them. They're going to give up significant stuff for someone in Siakam that could sign elsewhere. Same thing with OG in a couple of months. And that mindset has to be adjusted. And a big reason why is because they do have a future. They do have the means to become a really competitive team over the next couple of seasons, because Scottie Barnes is awesome. He had a weird second year. To begin this year, he has been awesome. He's hitting like step back threes. It's crazy how much his confidence level has risen this year compared to where it was at certain points last year. And you can't screw that up, right? You had opportunities to improve the roster over the last couple of seasons. You haven't done it. And now it's time to get value out of at least Siakam. If you want to keep OG because you think that he's a nice, connective wing and you have a good idea of what you feel like you're going to pay him in the offseason, even if you're paying OG like $25 million a year, there's a theoretical universe in which that makes sense for a future Raptors team, whether it be as an asset or otherwise. But Siakam makes no sense to me, because if he's actually going to leave, he's going to be the number one free agent. The number one actually attainable free agent this offseason is Pascal Siakam. There are going to be teams that are going to throw a ton of money at him. You could absolutely lose him for nothing when you could trade him now and get some stuff in exchange. And if Toronto was 7 games over 500, if they look to be one of the better teams in the conference, I would have no issue with this. I would have no issue with keeping Siakam, OG, even though they are pending free agents, and just trying to figure it out and seeing how good you can be this year. But clearly they're not very good, and they need to adjust what their thought process is moving forward, because you cannot, there is a 0% chance. It is in my opinion, fireable offense as a GM of an NBA team if you go back-to-back off seasons with Van Fleet leaving for nothing and Siakam leaving for nothing when you had opportunities to trade both guys. That is, in my opinion, an on-the-spot fireable offense if you let two guys that talented leave in back-to-back off seasons getting nothing for them in return. The OG thing is a little bit more complicated and confusing because his value is hard to pinpoint. It seems like they're overvaluing him, but I'm fine trying to keep him because it should be easier theoretically to match whatever money and bring him back. Siakam is the big one, and when you add that to the context of losing Van Fleet last offseason, this to me is a very tenuous situation in Toronto. Scottie Barnes is going to be very good. He is in all likelihood going to be an all-NBA caliber player at some point in his career, and you need to start thinking now about how to build that version of your team. And the best way to do that would have been to get value for Van Fleet before he left in free agency, but again, Houston threw a ton of money at him. That's fine. And trade Pascal Siakam. It's not like he's 35 years old. He's got value. He's on an expiring contract, which is going to be an issue for some teams. But if you can find a team that Siakam wants to go to and re-sign with, talk to that team, get some stuff for him, and figure it out moving forward. There's no reason to keep him, as well as having lost Fred Van Fleet last offseason. It is, to me, one of the more concerning situations you can be in as a fan is sometimes general managers, they make bad choices. Sometimes team building is hard. Sometimes you don't get everything correct. Sometimes guys get hurt. Players don't play well. But when you lack direction as a franchise, when it seems like the guy in charge has a different idea of the direction of the team than he should, that is very, very concerning. And that's what I think is possible is happening in Toronto right now. And that is fixable. This can still be a great front office, a team that has developed players really well over the years. They can still get back to that. But right now, it's definitely a concern.